My mother-in-law DNA tested our daughter and told my husband she wasn't his. My husband, 48M, and I, 45F, have been together for 25 years, and we have 3 children, an 8-year-old daughter, a 15-year-old son, and a 17-year-old daughter. Conceiving our youngest daughter was a struggle. We spent years trying with no success, eventually turning to a fertility specialist who prescribed medication to help with ovulation. We couldn't afford IVF, so this was our last attempt before considering adoption. Then something horrible happened. While my husband was out with his brother, our home was broken into, and I was SA'd. It occurred right around the time I was supposed to be ovulating. At the hospital, I took emergency contraception, even though I knew it would undo all the progress we had made with the medication. I couldn't bear the thought of getting pregnant as a result of the assault. Months later, I began feeling off, sick and depressed, likely due to the trauma. I hadn't been eating properly, and I assumed these symptoms were connected to that. But then I discovered I was pregnant. My husband and I were thrilled, but that joy turned to shock when I had my first appointment and learned I was 15 weeks along, not the 5 or 6 weeks I had expected. Because I had been experiencing irregular spotting and bleeding since taking the emergency contraception, it never crossed my mind that I could be that far along. My husband and I were devastated by the uncertainty surrounding the paternity. When we saw our baby on the ultrasound screen, I knew I couldn't go through with an abortion, and my husband agreed. We talked endlessly about our options, including adoption, and what we would do if the baby wasn't his. Ultimately, he said he didn't care about the paternity. We decided not to find out and agreed to leave that choice to our daughter when she was older. At this point, my SA case was still unsolved, but it had been linked to other SAs and murders in the area. Thankfully, a few years ago, my attacker was caught, and he was finally sentenced about a year ago. I spoke at the hearing, and my older children knew I had been attacked, but I didn't go into detail. They only knew it happened before they were born. Last Christmas, my mother-in-law gave my daughter a 23andMe DNA test as a gift. Just her, not the other kids. I thought it was strange, but didn't dwell on it. In hindsight, I should have recognized what was really going on. My daughter was just as confused and asked if I wanted to use the test instead since I'm adopted. I agreed and gave her an Amazon gift card to replace the gift. My daughter later pointed out that my mother-in-law had been unusually critical of her in recent months, making comments about how she looked different from the rest of the family. She would say things like, "I wonder where those eyes came from," or "Where did that hair or height come from?" She even made remarks about my daughter's slim figure, saying, "I wonder why you're so skinny." My daughter looks a lot like me. Same eye color, same hair color and texture, but she's much taller. I'm 5 feet 8 inches, and she's 6 feet tall. I'm on the heavier side, as is my husband, while my daughter is very slim due to her being an athlete. I've never had any reason to question that she's my husband's child based on looks alone. After my daughter told me about my MiL's behavior, I confronted her, but she brushed it off, saying my daughter was just being sensitive. This happened a couple of months ago. This version addresses any unclear or wordy sentences, passive voice, bland words, low fluency, and overused expressions while keeping the story detailed and engaging. A couple nights ago, my mother-in-law invited my husband and me out for dinner and told us to leave the kids at home because she had something important to discuss with us. We did. We went to a restaurant we're eating at, and my mother-in-law handed me and my husband 2 separate envelopes. My husband and I both looked in the envelope, and they were DNA comparison results. I asked my mother-in-law what it was, and she said, "The proof that you're the garbage I always knew you were." I was extremely confused. I asked whose DNA she compared, and as I said that I just knew, she said my husband and my daughter. My husband looked at me, and he looked so hurt and lost. I'll never get that image out of my head as long as I live. I called her a heartless child, and my husband and I left. I blocked her number from mine and my kids' phones, but I figured my husband needed to make that decision on his own. My husband told me last night my mother-in-law called him, and he stopped by after work at her house. She was telling my husband she's known for a while and suspected for a very long time, and that she wasn't sure how to approach the topic with him. My husband asked how she knew that she said she overheard my brother-in-law talking to his wife and heard our daughter may not be his. My mother-in-law took that to mean that I cheated, so she did a DNA test. Last year around the hearing, my husband got drunk and ended up mentioning the hearing and some details to my BIL. Apparently that night, while sleeping, he said, "I couldn't protect her, and what if she's not mine?" My husband was extremely drunk and did not remember doing this. My mother-in-law does not know that I was SA, but she does know there was a break-in and I was attacked. She kept trying to convince my husband to leave me. My husband told her what she did was unforgivable and that he was going to cut her off. My husband is inconsolable. He's so upset he told his mother to F off and then told her that my attack was actually an SA, and that's who our daughter's biological father is. It still makes me sick to say that. She tried to apologize, but my husband told her he couldn't forgive her and not to contact any of us. I told everyone my mother-in-law DNA tested our daughter, and we were done with her. I have 7 siblings. 5 think I'm in the right, the other 2, and my brother-in-law can't believe my mother-in-law did that, but understands why, because she didn't have the entire story and assumed I wasn't being truthful to my husband. But even if I wasn't, I can't imagine being a parent so concerned with my child's relationship that I would go to those lengths to meddle. First update. We are in no contact with my MiL. I haven't talked to her since the dinner, and my husband hasn't spoken to her since a couple days after that. She knows I was SA'd and attempted to apologize to my husband when he last spoke to her, but he basically told her to F off and he couldn't forgive her. We also had a good relationship up until this point, or so I thought. We hung out and did stuff together. I was just really hurtful that she told me at dinner when I asked what the envelope was that it's proof that you're the trash I always knew you were. People want to know why or how I could have kept a baby knowing the possibility of who'd be the father. And the answer is that even if I had known definitively that he was the father, my decision probably wouldn't have been different. She is as much a part of me biologically speaking as she is him. And after seeing her move around, I didn't desire an abortion, although it would have been nearly impossible for me to get one anyway where I lived. Although she was conceived in violence, she was raised in love, understanding, and acceptance. She is much more mine and my husband than her biological father. Also, all he did was contribute DNA to her, nothing else. He's had no influence or part in her life, and likely never will. I know DNA doesn't mean anything in the sense of who she is, but that doesn't diminish the devastation and anger I feel knowing he is responsible for any part of her. I'm honestly not sure why my husband and I were so blindsided, but I feel like you can convince yourself of anything given the right circumstances. Initially, we did feel it was likely not my husband's because of the year we went without conceiving, but when I got pregnant with my son pretty soon after my daughter, I know I convinced myself that not only was it a possibility, it was the only likely scenario. It's also not lost on me that the decision to keep her isn't something many people agree with apparently according to this post, but I know I made the right decision because my daughter is the most amazing girl and I couldn't imagine my life without her. My daughter is doing well, and her relationship with myself and my husband hasn't changed at all. If anything, her relationship with my husband is much better. She makes an effort to spend more time with him, and they have many shared interests. My daughter said she isn't upset I didn't tell her. She's upset she had to find out when she wasn't truly ready, and she was happy I was able to share such a vulnerable, horrible event with her. My son now knows the specifics, and my youngest knows my daughter has a different dad but not about my SA. People also seem to be concerned with her genetics and how it affects her future health. She already had neonatal testing for genetic disorders. I am not a carrier of any autosomal recessive disorders, and she has had genetic testing for autosomal dominant ones and was negative. She also has had genetic testing for several different forms of cancer because of my biological family history. Anything else couldn't affect her until adulthood, and they are all almost heavily influenced by lifestyle, so they wouldn't be a concern until she's much older. Edit. For clarity and context, we tested my daughter and husband because they never willingly gave my mother-in-law a sample, and we didn't want to ask her how she got the DNA. Also, my husband and I have been in therapy on and off since this happened 18 years ago, and my kids have been in therapy since they were in middle school. I make them go 4x a year, and they can go more often if they desire. When this initially happened, I started having my daughter go weekly, and now she goes every other day. Final update. I'm so angry, I don't know what to do now that I have confirmation. She is dead to me. I just confirmed my daughter isn't my husband, and I'm devastated. A couple months ago, my mother-in-law unknowingly DNA tested our daughter because she didn't believe she was my husband. To make a long story short, around the time of conception of my daughter, I was SA'd during a home invasion. This was after several years of trying for a baby. I took EC at the hospital and was depressed and stressed after. I didn't realize I was pregnant until I was 15 weeks. My husband and I decided regardless we were going to keep the baby. After she was born, we decided we didn't want to find out. I felt like I knew absolutely she wasn't my husband would change how she was treated. My husband's family didn't know her paternity was in question, and they didn't know I was SA'd. Well, a couple months ago, my mother-in-law invited my husband and me out to dinner. She blindsides both of us by handing us envelopes with DNA results in them and basically says she always knew I was a liar and cheater and is trying to tell my husband to leave with her. My husband was devastated when he realized our daughter isn't his. I've never seen him look more hurt. We had planned to tell my daughter when she was older that there was a question of her paternity and allow her to undergo DNA testing if she wished. But instead I had to tell my 17-year-old the whole story of how I was assaulted and what her grandmother did. We didn't really know how my mother-in-law did the DNA test, so we decided to get another test done. I got the confirmation this morning that my daughter and my husband have no biological relationship. I'm so angry and pissed. We always knew this was a possibility, but I didn't think so a second it could happen. She looks so much like her siblings and me. Thank God, she has no resemblance to who SA'd me. I immediately made her start seeing her therapist more regularly, and she seems to be doing rather well despite everything. Thankfully,